All right, gentlemen, we've been over the rules. Protect yourself at all times. Follow my instructions. We're going to have a clean fight. Touch gloves. Let's do it.
Recently, there was a rumor about the top that the fight Khamzat Chimaev against Paulo Costa could take place at the end of the year. Apparently, Khamzat decided to stay in the middle division and destroy everyone there. Let me remind you that before the fight with Diaz, Khamzat exceeded the limit of his category by as much as 3 kilograms. Most of the fans and experts wanted him to change 84 kilograms, and apparently he listened to this advice. Hello fighters, with you channel MMA predictions. In this video, I will give a prediction for one of the potential fights of Khamzat Chimaev against Costa. But before starting this video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like it so that as many people as possible can see this video. As you know, Khamzat's last fight was discussed more than ever. On the eve of UFC 279, there was so much kippish, and each time Dana White tried to protect the fighters from this, but he did not succeed. First, at the UFC training center, Chimaev met with Costa, who not so long ago spoke flatteringly in an interview, and Khamzat decided to talk to Paulo. Instantly, the seconds and sparring partners harnessed themselves and did not allow the fighters to find out the attitude. They shouted a little and then dispersed. After that, before the press conference, the next skirmish took place. This time, Kevin Holland ran over Khamzat and began to offer him to shave his beard for free. Chimaev, accordingly, was shocked by this behavior and broke through the kick front on the body, and then Nate Diaz's team joined, but it was stopped in time and the conflict did not turn into a tough batch since there were more than 100 people behind the scenes. After all this, another misfortune happened. Chimaev gets on the scales and it turns out that he failed the weigh-in. It seemed that Diaz would take the fight exactly, but no, he refuses to fight him and Tony Ferguson comes out to replace him, and Khamzat Chimaev will meet against Kevin Holland, who is chattering all the time. White had to try hard to keep the card intact in recent days. Everything broke in and not every promoter is able to react so quickly. As a result, Chimaev fought in the main event and Diaz in the main event. Both won. Now they are looking for a new opponent for Khamzat, and one of them may be Paulo Costa. He is a top middleweight fighter. He does not have a fight. They also already had a skirmish. I am sure the fighters will be able to promote this fight. But right now we will begin the analysis of this fight and identify the favorite. Percussive style. As for the Greyhound strike, I can't say anything about the last fight. I can only rely on the fights that were beaten before Holland, and there Khamzat showed his best side. He boxed on equal terms with one of the best representatives of welterweight boxing. Plus, he was even able to shake him several times and knock him down. He also needed only one blow for Murchal to be on the surface, and these fighters, I want to tell you, are not bags. Gerald, after losing to Chimaev, made a record of 4 wins and 1 controversial defeat by decision, and Gilbert in the past was a contender for the belt and defeated many tops, and he also knocked down Kamaru Usman. As you yourself understood, Khamzat is a real problem. He has dynamite in his hands that can overthrow Costa. Let's take Khamzat's fight outside the UFC. Remember the fight where Chimaev knocked out Ikram Aliskerov? So recently, he won in the first round at Dana White's Contender Series, and most likely he will have a contract with the UFC. All those who were knocked out by Khamzat, I want to tell you, are far from bags. Now let's talk about the Brazilian striking technique. Costa has been learning the basics of this aspect for a long time, and in his career there are plenty of finishes decorated in the first round. Exchanging with Paulo in the rack is a bad idea, because if Khamzat underestimates the Brazilian, then he can pay with a deft knockout. If you remember the recent fight of Paulo against Luke Rockhold, then I realized one very important thing. If you look at the Brazilian as an elite level fighter and accept his striking power as his dangerous weapon, then you are unlikely to fly face down, since you will see study all his movements and he will actually do nothing to you. But if you perceive him as an easy walk, then everything ended in the first maximum of the second round. Costa in a standing position is a real problem for everyone in the middle division, and no exceptions. One blow can change the outcome of the fight. As a favorite, I choose Paulo Costa due to his experience, knowledge, plus striking power in this area makes him a clear favorite in the fight against Khamzat Chimaev, at least in the stand. Playing from below. Then we have a fight, and what can be said about the skills of the Brazilian on the ground? It seemed that Paulo is from Brazil, and he should at least know the basic elements of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But no, Paulo is practically not interested in this. If he is on the ground, he is unlikely to rise. This was shown to us by the fight against Marvin Vettori. He had no problem translating the Brazilian and squeezing all the juice out of him. In terms of 50-50 defense, sometimes Costa defends perfectly against all the opponent's passes. An example is a duel against Luke. No matter how much he tried to make a takedown, Paulo did not allow it to be done. But in a duel against Vettori, the Brazilian showed the worst version of himself. Sometimes, when Costa's opponent had nothing to do with wrestling, he translated himself and did not control him for a long time, but as soon as a wrestler came out in front of him, the writing was gone. Many may say that Paulo has good physical data, and it will be a big problem for Khamzat to transfer a fighter from Brazil, but I have the answer to all this, and I will tell you a little later. Now let's move on to Chimaev's fight, which is getting stronger and stronger with each fight. Look, he doesn't feel his opponents. He destroyed John Phillips. He destroyed Reese McKee. It seemed that Kevin Holland would be able to give him at least a little trouble on the ground floor. But no, Khamzat didn't feel him either. He threw Holland all over the octagon as if he was practicing throws on a wrestling mannequin. And this is not an exaggeration. Khamzat ate Kevin alive and forced him to knock. Also, in addition to wrestling in the pocket of a greyhound, there is experience in Jiu-Jitsu. He is also dangerous in absolutely everything, and being near Chimaev is the same when there are 10 Rottweilers in front of you and you are trying to escape from them. Also, now it's time to tell why Chimaev will be able to translate the Brazilian without any problems. The Chechen himself is a big fighter, although this is not visible, but he has natural power and Costa is not such a problem for him. The favorite here without any hesitation will be Khamzat Chimaev, and explain why I think you should not. Cardio spirit. In terms of Chimaev's cardio, we only saw him at 3 rounds, and then at the end he was more exhausted than ever. Khamzat Chimaev has not brought fights to the decision of the judges throughout his career, so it is pointless to evaluate his endurance right now. Judging only by the fights against Gilbert Burns, then Chimaev's breathing is not the best. Some may reproach us for the fact that his last fight was scheduled for 5 rounds, and he was preparing for this distance for the whole camp. But I have an answer question for you. You seriously think that he plowed like a damned man and tried to increase his gas tank as much as possible? He was supposed to meet with Nate Diaz, a fighter who loses to everyone and don't go to a fortune teller. So it's clear that Chimaev conducted light training to keep fit. If you don't agree with me, then I invite you to the comments there. You can express your opinion. As for Paulo Costa's stamina, it is clearly better than that of Khamzat. He went through a 3-round war against Yoel Romero. He was also able to cause problems in the later rounds to Marvin Vettori. Costa knows what it is to go through all 5 rounds. At this distance, he will feel much more comfortable than Chimaev. The Brazilian will be considered the favorite in this aspect, since his experience cannot be surpassed. In terms of the spirit of the greyhound, no one will catch up. His zeal for battle, his adrenaline, no one can compare with this. Forecast. My prediction will be this: Khamzat Chimaev, as in the fight against Holland, will immediately go for a takedown, instantly take his back and finish Paulo Costa in the first round. Why so? Because Paulo will not be able to resist the Chechen struggle of the Greyhound. The future of fighters. Chimaev's future is the best that could be imagined. Most likely he will get a middleweight title fight. Whether he wins it or not, I will not guess, since Adesanya are serious opponent. Costa will continue to perform as before. Most likely he will be given some more hype fight.